So, as they're leaving, I want to preface. I was tricked, completely and absolutely tricked, because Brother Kyle connected with me this past week and said, "Hey, we're really enjoying ourselves. We have a lot of timeshares to go view, and I'd like an extra day." And in my head, I thought he meant on Sunday, that he wanted an extra day of vacation on Sunday. He didn't tell me that he would be back for this. It was very misleading. So I was not nervous at all until I walk into Saturday morning's council meeting, and he's sitting right there. And I was like, wait a minute. Am I not preaching? He's like, yeah, you're preaching. I hope you're preaching, because I haven't prepared anything. And I was like, yeah, but I thought you were in Branch. He's like, yeah, we came back. I just didn't want to come back early for sermon prep. That's how diligent he is with sermon prep for us. But I wasn't nervous at all until I know he'd be sitting in the audience. It's always that moment where you have to do what your boss does and do his job, and then you're like, oh, well. He's going to sit there and go, yeah, I wouldn't have said that. I mean, he could have said this. It would have been a little bit better. So that's what's going to be through the back of my head, but it's not a big deal. So this morning we're talking about plants, we're talking about my son, and we're talking about our lives. I talk fast, and my wife says last night, and she said, oh, by the way, just don't go on any like tangents like you always do. Wait, what does that mean? She goes, well, you tend to like get on a line, and then you think about something else, and your ADHD kicks in, and then you're on this whole other thing, and then you have to stir back. I'm not doing it now. I'm referencing. So if you see me stopping, and I'm just like in blank mode, I haven't lost my place. I'm stopping my brain from going on another sermon in the middle of my sermon. So my youth sometimes get like mini sermons inside mini sermons on top of mini sermons when we talk about stuff, but it's all right. So we're going to start in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 19 through 25. I'll read it, so if you don't have a Bible, there's one in front of you, and if you don't want to look it up, it's okay, because I'm going to read it for you. So we'll be there. So if you don't know, I'm Kevin Howland. I'm the youth pastor here for the last couple months, and it's been going great. My family is very excited to be back in church. I was the family pastor, which is like birth through high school for Walden Community Church in Walden, and the COVID hit, and I am a people person, and sitting in an office not doing anything, I was driving me crazy, and I really fell into some pretty solid depression, as my wife would say, when that was happening. And so she said, you can't keep doing this. You need to start praying what God has in store for you. So God was angry with me and said, you're going to go be a teacher for a little while. So that's what I do right now. And then luckily, when we moved here, I was like, I love teaching. Teaching's great. I teach special ed kids in a life skills class. And everybody asked me, do you ever get nervous about preaching? And I said, again, I teach life skill kids in a special ed class. There's no nervous of this. This is easy peasy compared to when you have one of my students just like call me out and be like, no, that's wrong, dude. You can't do that. So they're a lot more brutal than if you don't have kids, or if you do have kids, you know, if you don't. But kids are brutal, and there's special needs kids really, really keep you in check. So this doesn't bother me, except the fact that my boss is sitting in the audience, but we've already discussed that. So I started teaching, and we moved back here, and I was like, man, this can't be it, God. What do you, like, I need to serve, more than this. And there's a special opportunity for a pastor to be in a secular setting, so I have a good, solid influence on the students and the teachers and the staff at Lumberton High School. The problem is I'm not the best, and so that doesn't always play out as well as I think it would, or hope it would. And then they also kind of how do I say this? As a pastor, you don't get invited to all the barbecues. Does that make sense? Because nobody wants their pastor sitting there while they're trying to relax and have some food and fun on the weekends, right? And so I've accepted that and understand. So when I go into, it was funny because when I first went into teaching, a friend of mine that was at Crestwood when I was a children's pastor there, she is one of the pairs there, and she like told my whole staff, all right, you guys got to be on your P's and Q's. this guy is a pastor. He is super religious. He is super, like, straight-laced. And then they met me, and they're like, wow, she was completely lying to us because he's definitely not straight-laced. But it did set the tone for, you know, being a pastor and them watching themselves around me, which kind of takes away from being, as someone that does not a pastor in a secular environment, can be a minister in their own right. But I prayed about it, and then I opened Google and searched, just as a chance, and searched jobs at Lumberton for youth or children's or whatever, and this was open, and this was here, and so I applied, and a lot of you were in on that, and some of you were there the night I gave a little bit of my testimony at the Wednesday night before the business meeting, and then something happened. You guys hired me, so, you know, there's that. But it's been a blessing for my family, and the reason being is because church is so important to me. And it breaks my heart because I hear so many excuses when people find out I'm a pastor. They're like, oh, I don't go to church. Yeah, I went one time, and this person was really rude to me, and they judged me, and I've never set foot back in a church. And my argument to that is, do you eat at restaurants? And they're like, yeah. I said, well, I've been to some restaurants that are awful. But as you can tell, they did not keep me from going to other restaurants. Right? So, but we get, I'm sure if you're out there and you got to invite people to our church, you get the excuses, you get the things. You know, I had a pastor that was really rough to me and offended me and stepped on my toes, and I never stepped foot back in there. And it breaks my heart because we weren't designed as humans, as God created us, to be alone. We were designed to be in community. We were designed to be in church. So our journey, I grew up in church, a Southern Baptist church in West Monroe, Louisiana, called Cedar Crest. I was there my whole life until I left for the Army, and so I was drugged to church every Sunday, every Wednesday, every Thursday that anything was happening, if there was a revival. I grew up in church. My wife, Sydney, was not the same. She visited some church and started going when she was in high school, but she didn't have the same, like, push for church as I did. So when we got married, I was raised in church and drugged to church, so my first thing to do was like, I don't want to go to church. And she wasn't used to that lifestyle, so it wasn't as it wasn't as important to her as someone that was raised in church and wanted to raise her kids in church, and et cetera. So we started our life, we started our marriage. We have started off with a beautiful baby boy named Camden, and he's right there. And so we're going along. I'm a police officer. I got out of the Army. I'm a police officer, and so I was on shift one night. It was 2008, January 2008. I'm sorry, that's when he was born. Sorry, in October 2008, so only a few minutes later, I get a call while I was on shift, and Sydney says, something's wrong. He won't stop crying. I'm taking him to the hospital. And I was like, okay, like he's just crying. And she was like, no. Something's wrong. And that was that mama's intuition. So she took him to the hospital. And this is one of the stories she doesn't like that I tell. But I'm on shift. We're a close-knit group. It's not a big police department. So I'm like, hey, something's wrong with Camden. I got to go to the hospital. So we all drive to the hospital, my whole shift. So the doctor's in there sitting, taking some information and stuff like that, and the whole crew walks in. So 6 police officers walk into this hospital room. It's no bigger than where I'm pacing right now. And so it was funny because the nurse walked in to do some more vitals. She goes, oh, sorry, I'll come back when you guys are done. And we're like, yeah, we gotta write it. And they were just hamming her up like she'd abused her kid. And she was like, no, these guys need to get out because this is her father. This is my son's father, and we need to do this. So it was pretty funny. She doesn't like that story because it made her look like she was in trouble with the police. So that started a journey. We started at that local hospital. They sent us to a Monroe hospital. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. He would literally eat something, and he would just lay out like a board. And you could literally hold him up. And I was like, oh, my child's possessed. This is what this is. And he's screaming and crying, and and you could tell that baby was just in severe pain. And so we took a long journey. It took about, as a pastor, when you have your wife in the audience too, she will sometimes correct you, but she wrote me out notes to make sure that I didn't get dates and times wrong. So y'all don't worry, she's covered me. So we started at Denver. We started at West Monroe, went to Monroe, went to Arkansas Children's. Our Arkansas Children's was rough for me because I still was working at the time, and I had to drive back and forth. And we were a teacher and a police officer, so we made bank. Let me tell you, we were loaded. And we spent 43 days in Arkansas Children's. When I left that hospital, and this is the moment that I realized that this is not a joke. We still didn't know what was wrong with him. All the doctors were trying different stuff. They could not figure what it does. They finally determined that he had pancreatitis, which for an infant is a death sentence, if you don't know that. The survival rate of infant pancreatitis is about 2%. And then we leave, and I see the bill for his lab work alone for 43 days in Texas Children, and for our part was $240,000. So it starts really hitting in that this is bad. Something's not right. And you have a realization like, holy cow, is this our new life? We have a sick son. How long will this go on? What's going to happen? How much is this going to cost? We can't afford this. We're going to have to, what are we going to do? We were unchurched. We were alone. We had my parents, Sydney's parents, and a couple friends. But God bless people, and people are great. But after about 2 weeks of a tragedy, people tend to slip away. And the phone calls stop, the visits stop, and you feel really alone sitting with your wife and your firstborn child, and at that time your only born child, who you don't know if he's going to live another week, and you have nobody to turn to, and you are the man. You went to Afghanistan, you went to Iraq, you were in the army, you kicked down doors, you were a police officer, you arrested people, took them to jail. When people need help, you are the one that comes. I was that guy. When there's a loud explosion, most people go that way, I go towards the explosion. That's what I did my whole adult life at that point. And I was helpless. I did not know what to do. We leave Texas Children, and our pediatrician back in West Monroe did a whole lot of research for us, and he found a doctor. His name's Dr. Narkowicz. He is the premier doctor in the world on pediatric GI stuff. He's the best in the world, and so we got an appointment with him. So we flew all the way to Denver, Colorado. It's a really neat story because she got to fly on a bunch of small planes, and they took care of her, and she was in a lap of luxury. I wasn't so great. I had to drive from West Monroe, Louisiana, because we're still, loaded teachers and cops. So we had tons of money to spare. So I just decided, I don't like myself. I'll drive from West Monroe to Denver, Colorado, while my kid's flying in the air with my wife. Oh, wait, who's now pregnant? And somehow in this, we got pregnant with Adeline, and we were like, oh, gosh, if this is what being a parent is, and there's a possibility that she could go through this too, it was not a joyous occasion. We were not happy. We were petrified that something was going to happen to her too, or it, because we didn't know. And we were still in this, crisis process. See, I almost went on a tangent there. Do you see me catch myself? So we get to Denver. We're still unchurched. Now we're in several states away from all of our family. We were all alone. What was great about that hospital, it's probably the best children's hospital we've ever been to. I hate to say that we know this because we've been to so many now, is that their staff is impeccable, and it's a research hospital, and so they have a lot of funding. So luckily, Camden had the exact same 2 nurses on rotating shifts. Well, it's actually 4 because he had 2 nurses assigned to him, and they were the same 4 women the entire time we were there, which is a blessing because they got to know us, and they love Sydney's southern accent. And if it wasn't for that, we would, I think, be in a much worse state. But luckily, that hospital is just amazing. So there is, at a point where they decide that the only answer they have is to do exploratory surgery on him and see what's causing him to have pancreatitis. There's only one surgeon that does that type of surgery. He does it about 3 to 4 times a year around the entire world. And he's the only one that's ever done it. And so they called him. We meet him. He's a brilliant man. It was insane. It was scary. I didn't think I need that, sir, the water. So he comes in. He's like, hey, this is a very dangerous surgery. There's a high probability your baby won't survive. there's another high probability if we go in and do the surgery, we won't find anything. We won't find what's wrong. And you would just open your kid for nothing. And I don't know. We don't know. No one has answers still. They just knew he couldn't eat at all because it would just hurt him and destroy him. And he had tubes running everywhere, and he had got fed intravenous with TPN through that for, I think he was on that for at least 2 months, I believe. And there's a whole lot more for us coming home for Christmas and having going back Christmas Eve and everything like that. So at this point, we are just done. We are broken. I mean, if you can say that as a guy that fixes everything and everybody, all of his friends call him for help and stuff, and I could not do anything for my child. I was a broken man. I was done. And the doctor came in and said, we're going to do the surgery tomorrow. But as a human, as a person, I can't do this surgery without at least trying to feed him one more time. So me and my wife, for the first time in our marriage, got down on our knees because we couldn't do it on our own. And I realized that I was nothing in this situation. So the first time together, and we've said, man, we might have prayed together before at an event, or my mom would try and drag us to church all the time. God bless her. But for the first time together, we knew we were done. That there was a possibility that we would no longer have a child the next day, and we couldn't do anything about it. So we prayed earnestly, and it wasn't the begging prayer, it's like, I'll give up, craps on Tuesday if you help me find my keys kind of prayer. It was a humbling, we're at your feet. That was a pause, so I wouldn't keep crying, if you didn't notice that. And so they came in, and that picture, if you want to put it back up there, was Camden's, you got it? That top was his first meal in like 9 months. Like 6 months, right? About 6 months? Yeah. Of course, that night it had to be spaghetti, so he got it all over his face. And we were like, dude, it could possibly be your last day on earth. We don't know. It could be the beginning of something beautiful. We don't have a clue. So the nurses in Sydney stripped him down, and they gave him spaghetti, and that kid ate and ate and ate. And so the next day, the doctor comes in, and he says, I don't know what God you serve, but your son is not showing any signs of pancreatitis. His levels are normal, and obviously he can eat. And he said, we don't have a medical explanation at all. And that was it. We went home. And we didn't even know how to be so grateful to God at that point because we were so unchurched at that moment. So we came home and went back to life. And life continued on. I was a police officer. She was a teacher. And we just kind of slipped away from the approval and the appraisal or the praise to God of what he did in our son's life. Now, we didn't shy away from it. When we say God healed our son in that hospital, we told everybody that. We did not play around. But we still were unchurched. And so time goes back to normal, and everything goes back to normal, and then our real lives come back, and we set in, and being in a relationship that doesn't have God in it, we started to struggle. I was still angry that I could not do anything to help my kid. And I hate having to say that as a pastor, as a man of God, is that I was just mad that I couldn't be the one to fix it. And it made me angry. And I was a cop, and I didn't help. And so me and my wife almost divorced. We had Adeline by then, and we were in the middle of a house remodel. If anybody's done that, that can almost lead you to divorce. But being that we had all done with Camden and have a new baby, and we didn't know what it was like to be a regular parent because when Camden started teething and stuff like that, he was on morphine, and so when his teeth would hurt, he would just click a button and like start smacking that button. So we went through teething episode on morphine. If you can do that as a parent, it makes life a whole lot easier. So now we have Adeline, who's perfect. She's an angel. She's the greatest thing I ever had, besides my other 3 kids. And but she had normal baby stuff, so she was a terrible 2-year-old. She wasn't hooked up to a machine and couldn't run around the house. She went through the teething process. She went through all that. So we're still on pins and needles that something's going to happen and Camden's going to get sick again. We have a new baby. We have me being a cop working night shifts all the time, and just our world was horrible. And I wasn't the man I should have been. And so we came close. She said, I'm done with you, dude. You're not good. But we made a decision. We said, okay, God healed Camden. Maybe he can do a little bit better in our marriage if we let him in. So we got on our knees in a makeshift apartment in a house that I was remodeling. Sorry I put you through all that. And we got on our knees on the middle of the floor, and we prayed for God to come into our marriage. My parents had been praying for it, our friends. And we actually came together again like we did in the hospital for our son. And so we're like, all right, we're going to try this. Within 2 weeks, I lost my job as a police officer. And that was tough, because I was that guy. And I was like, wait a minute, God. We just invited you in. Life's supposed to get better. We're supposed to be together. We're supposed to do stuff. Like, what is going on? Why did you do this? And so I want to look at Hebrews chapter 10, verse 19 through 25. It says, therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain that is through his flesh, and since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed and with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not to neglect a meeting together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So it's very clear that, again, I couldn't do anything on my own, and I needed something. So as a police officer, we could have extra details. I used to volunteer, and you'd work the security service at First West, which First West is a huge, massive church, and they need security. I hate having to say that we live in a world that they do, because people would just come in on the streets and just interrupt. And so I worked those details a little bit. And so I didn't, at the time, want to go back to my mom and dad's church that I grew up in, because that it's just, I don't know, as a dad, as a father, as a husband, you want to, not be reminded of all your failures as a kid growing up. So I said, I'm not going there, because they know who I am, and they won't accept me, because they know what I've done. And so we decided, you know what, let's just try First West. We'll go in there and just start going to service. So we started going to service every Sunday for a couple months, a couple weeks, and it got better. It was good. It was enjoyable. We felt good. The music was great. I really enjoyed this morning. It was incredible music this morning. I love that. I love the praise and worship. And we did that, and we were super excited. We were like, yes, we're going to church. We're at church. But it still didn't really change us or our lives. We were still fighting. We were still struggling. I'm out of a job. I'm like, really embraced the stay-at-home dad thing, which killed me. And we're still not changing. Nothing was, in our relationship was really getting better. And so, unbeknownst to me, my mom and her entire Sunday school class has been praying for us for years and weeks, and she really pushed it. And they literally found a marriage retreat that they would all go to so they could invite us. Did not know that at the time, but the whole reason that their Sunday school class went to this marriage retreat is to help encourage us. So we went, and we had an incredible time, and it really made us focus on each other. But what was great is because it was focusing on each other through God, and that's something that we'd never done, and we didn't, even growing up in church, I didn't know how to do that in a marriage and as a family. And so one of the things that we talked about at that marriage retreat is to focus on our relationship with God and then focus on us, which obviously everybody says that. That's cliche Christian talk. We make sense. But it was talking about more about getting plugged in and doing stuff with your wife in service of God that we'd never done before. And so when we went back after that, and it was a great, glorious moment, but then you come back, even after like mission trips and youth camps and all that, you come back and then something happens and you kind of die out of that super high intense feeling about being and connected with God, and life returns, but it still kind of lingered. And so I'm sitting in service one day, and they announced that they needed some help in the children's department, and they were looking for a couple to volunteer, and they also needed some help. I think it was VBS or something like that. And so we looked at each other and we were like, I said, you know what, I'm gonna go meet this guy and go volunteer. So we met the children's ministry, we volunteer, and me and Sydney started teaching a Wednesday night class, like a small group thing. What were they, second grade boys? First grade boys. This is, I tell my students and the youth, sometimes we look at scripture and stuff and we see it like a movie. We've already seen the movie, so we know what's going to happen. But at the time, the people in the Bible and in scripture don't know what's going to happen, so sometimes we need to step back and take that perspective. I was a military guy and a cop, and now I'm in a room with 15 first grade boys. I said, no, sir, God, this ain't it. This ain't what happening. But I felt a passion, and we loved it, and we dove in. And then from that, we got invited to a life group with the other volunteers that volunteered at the children's ministry. And we connected with some friends that we still have to this day, that we talked to. Sydney talks to some of those wives almost every day. And we got plugged in, and we got poured into. God put us exactly where we needed to be in that church. And then I realized, I think I might be called to ministry. And I talked to my boss, or the guy that was over children's ministry, and then we talked about it. And then he hired me on as a part-time children's, I think my first title in ministry was Associate Children's Pastor of Life Groups, which is Sunday school. The longer the title you have in church, that's the less responsibility you have. It goes all the way up to the top, and when they call you brother or pastor, you're responsible for everything. But we started that road and started serving God intently. We got involved, and we planted roots. And that statement will come important in a minute when I get to step on everybody's toes, which I'm happy about. And so we were connected, and we were plugged in, and we were loved on when we found a home and a church community. And then August 2013, Camden started kindergarten, and he didn't make it a day. His stomach started hurting again. The same symptoms came back, and he started showing signs of pancreatitis. And we were like, whoa, God, we've been serving you. We've been plugging in. What is going on? What is this? And it kind of brought me back to my knees of the fact that we're not immortal, and we still have problems, we still have issues, because we were just going away and everything was great. And so Dr. Narkwicks recommended a lady or a doctor in Mississippi, and we went and had an appointment. And the greatest thing that she ever did was she walked in and started asking us questions and saying what was going on, and she stopped us. She goes, you know what? I don't care. I don't want to know about anything. I'm going to treat him like a brand new patient. Which in turn, she found a pseudocyst connected his intestine and his stomach, and it was just tried to develop an extra organ, and that's all it was. And that's what was causing the pancreatitis when he was little. But because he was so little when it first started, they couldn't see it on any of the ultrasounds. They couldn't see anything because it was kind of hidden back there. And really, the point of this is not his injury or his sickness or the pseudocyst or the surgeries or all that took place. The fact is that this time, we went through a crisis with a church. I didn't cook a meal for 6 months. I didn't have to worry about a bill of any kind for 6 months. We came home when he was recovering, and you couldn't even set anything on the counter because there was so much food. It was such a different environment. We had other kids. We had kids. We had more kids, and they always had a place to be. They were always taken care of. They didn't miss a lick of school. Nothing changed in their world with him being sick, except that his mom and dad and their brother wasn't there. The difference between going through the first crisis without a church and without God compared to going through a crisis with God and a church is why I'm so passionate about inviting people to church. Because we weren't made to do this alone. He didn't make us that way. We were made to be together and to support each other and take care of each other. And he gives each church member a passion of something that will support another member in this church somehow. We went through that, and it was again, a totally different environment. And so then we got through that sickness or that time, and they removed the pseudocyst, and it was a super long surgery, and it was kind of cool because he had a scar that went across his belly, and he liked to tell people his belly was little. He was 5. And so I always got to tell him, I was like, hey, if somebody asks, you got attacked by a bear. It sounds way cooler. And so it was the easiest, hardest thing I've ever gone through, is if I can say it that way. And so when we moving forward, when I went into full-time ministry, I moved here for Crestwood Baptist Church. I injured my knee right before coming here and thought, like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I tore my quad tendon off my kneecap. It's a super debilitating injury. Most people are like sports athletes that get it. I had like 3 or 4 surgery, got a huge infection. Like nothing back home would fix me. They couldn't take care of me. It was just an awful experience. But we had a church, and we had God, and we're like, we got this. We got this. It was crazy, too, because I stepped in the house. I stepped around Jonah. He was a baby, and he had the bouncer. And I went to step around him, and my knee, like, gave out, and it tore open. I collapsed. I'm bleeding everywhere. Adeline will tell you the story. She was like, yeah, there's just screaming and screaming and screaming, and there's blood everywhere. And Dad said, Sydney, shut up and call 911. So I remember a lot of blood loss. I'm sitting there, and Sydney's on the phone with 911, and I was like, hey, Sydney, tell them I got to put a tourniquet on this because I'm not doing so hot. And she's yelling at her, telling me not to put a tourniquet on. And my wife was like, ma'am, I don't think you know my husband. I'm not telling him anything. And so it was one of my proudest moments. My buddies were on the fire department, the police department come to take me to the hospital, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to get my big, bulky self onto the gurney. I was like, move! And I put myself on the gurney, and they helped me put my dangling knee up there. We go to the hospital. We go through all that, and they can't figure out. They have the surgery, and then it doesn't work, and they have complications, and everything just goes crazy with it. And we had been in the process with Crestwood down the street, and they said, hey, we still want you. Whenever you can come, just come. And so the doctor said, hey, we can't help you, but there's a clinic in Houston called the Fondren Group, and they're the best. And I was like, that's crazy that you say that because I am literally moving that way next week. And so we start that process, and God moved us from one church family to another church family. And this community and that church opened us. I don't know what you just mouthed. It was not like charades. It was just from one cozy nest to the next. And so we got to go through all of my knee injury and stuff on crutches, on doing all that, starting a new ministry, starting at Crestwood, and this new community and this new life. We even walked into our brand new rental, and they had just put down floors, and the dude that put down the floors shoved the fridge too far back, and he smashed the valve that's for the ice machine and flooded the whole house. My church family had that house completely removed of flooding and everything, and had our most stuff moved in. Like, we got done with the call to service on the Sunday at like 12, and my whole house was moved in and set up by like 5 o'clock. It was amazing. And it was, again, because we had a church, and we had a home at a church. Now look at Acts chapter 2, verse 42 through 47. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, and to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And all came upon every soul. And many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all, as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all people. And the Lord added to their numbers day by day those who were being saved. And so as our family, we embrace that. We set roots. We wanted to be a part of the church, and we wanted to serve. But unfortunately, as us two before all the tragedy, I would call, and some people in church, not saying anybody here, right? Nobody here, just in general, that we tend to be potted plants. So we look good, and we're doing our thing, but it kind of self-contains us to us, to what we need and what we do. So we come to church, and we sit in a pew as a potted plant, and we get fed, but it doesn't benefit anybody else but us, and we don't put down roots. And there's an amazing article I came across from the University of Portsmouth. And it says, contrary to the long-held belief that plants in the natural world are always in competition, new research has found that in harsh environments, mature plants help smaller ones and thrive as a result. The first study to examine plant interactions in a hostile environment over the lifespan found that plant sheltering seedlings help the smaller plants survive and are more successful themselves, a process in ecology called facilitation. The study, led by Dr. Rocio Perez Bareles at the University of Portsmouth and Dr. Alicia Montanes Navarro at Desertification Research Center in Valence, Spain, studied adult and seedling plants in ecological desert of gypsum soil in the southeast of Spain. The findings could have significance for those managing harsh environments, including coastal management. Dr. Morales said, if you're a seedling in a barren landscape, the top of a mountain or a sand dune, for example, you're lucky enough to end up underneath a big plant, your chances of survival are certainly better than if you landed somewhere on your own. We have found, which was surprising, is an established larger plant called a nurse shields a seedling. It also produces more flowers than the same plants of similar size growing on their own. So even in nature, I love God. I love science, and I love how it all ties in. Even God says that plants need each other. So what does a plant need? A plant needs sunlight, it needs water, and space to grow. And all you science guys like my son Camden will say, oh no, they need this, this, and this. But the basics is they need sunlight, water, and space to grow. So what does that look like? So a plant will be drawn to sunlight and grow towards the sun. And you've seen cool pictures of plants like weaning their way towards the window to reach that sunlight. And what does God tell us? God says, go and tell the world about me and be the light in this world. And have you ever been somebody that needs something and they're around a Christian giving that light off? They are drawn to them. They find them out. And if you've ever been in that situation where all of a sudden you're like, man, all these people are coming with their problems. Well, good job, because you are the light drawing the lost to you. And a plant needs, excuse me. And so, the second thing the plant needs is a plant needs water. And even a plant, it's pretty cool, because plants will grow towards water sources. And what happens is when a plant needs water, its roots release chemicals that change the way they grow, directing them towards water sources. And for me, I love that because Jesus said at the well, I am the living water. And so if we put ourselves in a position to be near him, we will change our DNA to grow towards him. And the last thing is that plants need space. They have to have somewhere to grow. And I think that's what God gave us churches for. Because if you take all those elements, you take yourself, and you get out of your pot, and you plant yourself in a church, he's going to provide the light. He's going to provide the water. And he's going to give you a place to grow. And if you allow all of those things to happen, you have nothing but the ability to grow in Christ. And God made it for us as churches that if we set our roots and we grow our plants, then he's going to drop seedlings near us. And especially when they're in harsh environments, we are going to have the ability to shelter them and protect them and grow them just like Christ has grown us. Church is so important to me because I have been in all of those situations and needed a church. And he's given me the ability to be the bigger plant for seedlings to protect and to help grow. And I, as your new youth pastor, challenge us as a church to plant our roots, to dig in, to be here, to be present, to get involved. I always hear people say, man, I want to plug in, but I really don't, know where I want to serve. That's a great opportunity because that means you got a talent that we don't have at our church, that you can start something and start growing and fill something that we don't even have. So if you have something, you have a place to grow, you have a space, you have light, and God has provided the living water. And I think that we have a special ability here to invite our community to grow with us. And it's just us initially setting down our roots and discipling each other and letting ourselves be discipled so that we could be the big plant and the little plant and grow our church. So church, I challenge you, if you have opportunities and you want to serve somewhere, to just ask. If you have an idea that God's put something in your heart, set your roots down. Get out of that potted plant and plug in. And this church will grow like a garden. It's just amazing the potential we have as a church in this community. I appreciate y'all letting me be a part of that, and I'm excited to continue to help grow the youth group and everything that we have to do. And that second picture up there, I don't know, was it yours or Camden's idea? So that was him right after he got released. As you know, he's had a ruptured appendix, and we've been in the hospital. And if I could say that this church delivered, taking care of my family, I have no words to express my thanks, because y'all have absolutely, only being here a few months, have blown my family away. We have wanted for nothing going through this. But that was him. Again, he got released to have a diet, and it was spaghetti night. And so we have a little bit more road. We have a little bit longer road. He's got to go back once everything calms down in the septic. And I hate to say this, but that dude keeps trying to die on us. They don't know why. They came in again and said, yeah, your kid shouldn't be alive. He's full-blown septic, and, he's got a ruptured appendix, and he's got all kind of stuff wrong. He had 2 massive cysts in his stomach that they had to drain. It's abscesses. She's correcting me. And again, they come in and say, I don't know why, but your kid's still alive. And I knew. Everybody's like, how are you so calm? I said, I don't know. I got a church and I got God. I don't need nothing. So we will go in a couple weeks to have the surgery once he calms down and get his ruptured appendix removed, and hopefully everything will go back to normal. But because of you guys, because of our church, it's been such an easy road compared to what it could have been without it. So if you're out there and you haven't fully plugged in, or if you know somebody in your life that says, man, they could have used us when they were going through that, it's not too late to invite them and to let them experience what life is like with the church compared to without. Dear Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for letting me have a moment